Let me share with you the agenda. I did send out the agenda in documents already today. I don't know if anybody was able to get into their email and see those this afternoon.
No,
But,
I got one. Yes, I did.
Yeah, I got it.
all right, so I'm going to start. Can you see the agenda?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm going to start with our checklist that's mandated by the governor. As chair of the Haverhill Fire Department Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to executive order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone and with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom conferencing for this electronic meeting. All members of the Fire Department Committee have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to listen and, if necessary, participate in the meeting through dialing the following phone number: 1-929-436-2866, or by clicking on the following website address, which is zoom.us/meeting. The meeting ID is 987-3150-5074. The password 899844. Providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing this meeting, including how to access the meeting using Zoom or telephonically. Instructions have also been provided on the town's website at www.haverhill-nh.com. Providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during this meeting. If anybody has a problem, please call 802-279-0535 or email me at townmanager@haverhill-nh.com, and I will address that problem. Adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event that the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes are taken during this meeting. They shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call of attendance. So let's start with, and when you give me your attendance, make sure you let me know if there's anyone in the meeting with you, in the room with you. So Bridget Codling, and there's nobody in the room with me. Darwin?
I'm present, no one here.
Richard?
I'm present. I have Tony Smith here.
Jeff Robbins?
I'm present. My fiance is just right around the corner and is within ear distance.
Phil Blanchard?
I'm here, and unless one of my guys is working still comes in, I'm alone.
Mike Lavoie?
Here, I'm alone.
Paul Kidder, have you logged on yet? Nope. Dennis Fournier?
I'm here by myself.
Mark for Bob Long?
Mark Johansson's here. I'm by myself.
And John Bouffard?
I'm here and by myself.
All right. So now that you've done that roll call vote, I sent out the agenda, which is right here on the screen. And we need to take a roll call vote to approve the agenda or add to it. So do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I'll second that. Mark Johansson.
Who moved the motion?
Bouffard.
Okay, John Bouffard moved the motion and Mark
Yes,
seconded?
yes.
Okay, roll call vote. Darwin?
Aye.
Richard?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Mike?
All right.
Paul, if he's here? Dennis?
Aye.
Bob?
Mark, aye.
Sorry,
Okay.
and John.
Aye.
All right. And so that passes unanimously to approve this agenda. So we also need to approve our minutes from the last meeting. Those were sent out to all of you a couple of times now. have you had a chance to read the minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take
I
a
would-
motion to approve the minutes.
I would move to accept them as written.
I'll
And that was-
second it.
Is that John?
Yes.
So John makes the motion. Who seconded?
I second it. Dennis.
Dennis, okay. And so I guess we'll do another roll call vote. Darwin,
Aye.
Richard,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Phil,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Dennis,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
and John.
Aye.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I say aye. So those pass unanimously as well. Thank you. We have no scheduled public appearances tonight. So the first thing I wanted to do was to go over the rules of procedure one more time and see if anybody wants to add to them. So I will bring those up and we can just look at them one more time. So the fire department committee rules of procedure, we agreed last meeting, must attend at least 80% of all committee meetings, be respectful to fellow committee members, contribute in a positive and collaborative manner, collaborate with fellow firefighters, precinct residents, and others to gather public input, provide input and suggestions that add value to the discussion, help to progress the goals and objectives of the committee, and when assigned tasks, complete them with rigor and on time, serve as an advocate within the community for the development efforts. Is there anything else anybody wants to add to our rules of procedure? Nobody? You can just jump in if you do. All right, well then I'm going to leave these here. We can revisit them if anybody in the future wants to add to them. So next on our agenda is to review and discuss the mission statement. So Bob and Mark's on the call tonight, worked on the mission statement. They were assigned that, or Bob was assigned that, and he recruited Mark, lucky Mark.
Do you have that email that we sent you today, Bridget?
Yep, can you see it on the
Good.
screen?
Gotcha. Super. Thank you.
So I'll let you present that.
Well, this is what Bob and I worked out over a few hashings out. Mission of the committee is to develop a pathway towards building the best consolidated fire department the town of Haverhill could field in all the districts and gain the professional input of our current fire chiefs, volunteer firefighters, town officials, and the general public to ensure we are acting in the best interests of the town as well as the current fire departments.
Nice. So that's the proposed mission statement for the committee. And we can take comments. Any suggested edits, additions? Do people approve of this mission statement for the department's, the committee's mission statement? Any comments are welcome.
So a suggestion, Bridget, is considering I've just seen this on the screen here for just 1 minute here because it just came out, maybe we could push the adoption off for a meeting so people could digest it.
Sure. That sounds good.
That makes sense.
Well, so I'll send this out for your consumption and comment for the next meeting. This came in a little bit late today, so that's why you didn't get it with your packet. Did everybody get their email with all the other documents?
Yes, I did.
Yes.
Okay. So
And Bob does apologize. He meant to get this out 2 days ago, but
that's
didn't work.
okay. No harm, no foul. We're going to table this and we'll take it up at the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay. But now you've seen it, so if you could all, read it over when I send it out again, and be ready to talk about it at the next meeting, that would be fantastic. Let me bring up the purpose statement. So John and Phil, or mostly John and a little Phil, I'm not really sure the contributing portions to this, but the next thing on our agenda is the purpose statement, and they have prepared that. John sent it to me today, and I will share it, and John can present that.
Bridget, can I share my screen so that I can control the page?
Oh, sure. Do you need me to do, I don't know how to do that. Can you just take control or do I have to give it to you?
I think you have to give it to me, but I think I can request it. Maybe.
More. I can make you a co-host. Would that,
Sure. We can try
maybe,
it.
maybe? Hopefully we don't lose everybody.
If not, we'll call back in.
Yeah. Okay, so yes.
Well,
That
I
made you
really
a
struggled-
co-host.
I really struggled to get on the first time, so I hope you don't lose me.
I got it.
You should be getting good at this, Darwin.
Yeah, it should be.
You should be like the Zoom pro.
Should be. I'm really slow learner.
Perfect.
So can you see my screen now?
We
Yes.
can. Now you are in control, John. Go for it.
Okay, so I spent all sorts of time coming up with a purpose statement and then read what a purpose statement was supposed to be and went, whoops. So I put this quote on the top from the Harvard Business Review about from Greg Ellis, and it just talks about what a purpose statement is. And I like his statement that this is what we're doing for someone else. So it's what are we doing for someone else? And based on that, I came up with a very quick little to effect positive and up-to-date change in the delivery of public safety services, fire rescue, hazard materials, technical rescue, EMS, public health, and emergency management in the town of Haverhill. So that's kind of what we do for other people. The other piece, though, is what's the purpose? Like, what is our goal? What is our future? What is our organizational objective? And I didn't feel like it was my responsibility to sit down and write goals for the group. That's kind of what the whole process is about. So I went through and kind of picked out some pieces and wrote, it is the purpose of the Town of Haverhill Fire Department Organizational Committee to examine fact and elicit opinion of the public. Sorry, your pictures are all in the way. Of the public for the purpose of developing a town fire department and all-encompassing structural elements to deliver a superiorly efficient and fiscally responsible service to the residents and visitors of our community, of the community. It should be our community. It's going to be our community in about 2 seconds. Our community. And the elements to the above stated system, I started listing out in an outline format some of the pieces, and this is by no means an exhaustive list. It's just some of the few pieces that I could come up with off of the cuff. So the organizational structure, which will have administration, which is probably 80% of what a fire department does. Suppression, which is probably 9 of the 10% remaining. EMS, depending on whether you're there or not, depending on what the group decides to, whether we head down that road, that adds to that 10% on the end. Hazardous materials responses in that last 1%. Tech rescue
John?
services. Yep.
Can you just clarify what suppression is?
Sure, suppression's fire suppression. So actually putting out a fire.
Yeah, can you just add that so that the public, when they read this, they know what we're talking about,
Sure.
please? There we go. Thank you.
The like C, D, E, and F are all kind of those in that last 1%. They don't happen all that often. They're pretty high risk events. But if you look at our current response matrix, we don't have those services available to the town of Haverhill. They're specialty services that come out of different districts, or we rely on people that may or may not be proficient or capable of taking care of that. Then G is community risk reduction services. I would actually take that out of the 90% of administration. Community risk reduction services are things like fire prevention inspections and the like. That I specifically put one of the wrong mouse, different computer. I specifically put a couple of the state RSAs in play with the discussion 154, 153, 153A, and 643, which is an interesting one that people don't tend to pay attention to. 643A is the official oppression abuse of office criminal code. which says that a public servant, as defined in RSA 640:2, Roman numeral 2, is guilty of a misdemeanor if, with a purpose of the benefit of himself, yada, yada, yada. Basically, it says if you don't do your job and you know you're supposed to do your job, then it's a misdemeanor and you're criminally liable for not doing your job. This particular RSA is extremely important to the community risk reduction portion. We have a responsibility to the community to buy RSA to do inspections in our community and don't do them. So technically we fall under the official oppression statute. That goes for all of the stuff that is in 154 and 153 that we're technically responsible for. So I added all those RSAs to the clump just so that we had some base knowledge. You'll see as I go down through this, and I'm not going to read all of it because I'm not going to insult your intelligence, but I'll explain a few things that I did throw in here. Human assets, I consider the most important, which is why I put them on the top. We don't have human assets, we're not going to put any fires out or do anything else for that matter. I separated out facility, mobile, and equipment assets because mobile assets would be our vehicles and anything that rolls down the road. Equipment is more the axes and small pieces of equipment and computers and that kind of stuff. That can be broken out even further, but I stuck that in there. I did break out training and development a little bit more than typical, just so that we had some understanding that the initial recruit standards in NFPA 1001 are significantly different than the operator training, driver operator training standards and the officer training standards of NFPA 1021. I don't remember the driver operator one, but that also includes the fact that there's certifications, there's education, there's knowledge, there's capabilities, and there's teaching capabilities that we can develop into this and actually build a robust program for the town of Haverhill. And continuing education is huge to break out because at the end of the day, what we really need is to make sure we have a good professional continuing education program to be able to provide our staff, whether certified or not, the knowledge and capability to be able to go out and fight a fire until they can get through a certification program if that's what the standard is. Governing documents, we've got to develop a good solid, and there's plenty out there. I spend most of my day reading many of them. Good solid group of governing documents with policy, procedure, guidelines, and general orders in order to make the risk to the community lower. Financial planning documents, capital asset replacement plan. I usually consider that up over $5,000 or $10,000. I'm sure the town has either an ordinance or a specific capital plan definition. That's what I was looking for. Mid-range assets, $1,000 to $5,000, and a protective equipment replacement plan. When you start looking at groups of people and how you're going to keep them into gear that's actually clean and organized and appropriate and within its 10-year date and et cetera, that becomes a pretty interesting process. Staff reimbursement plan, something that needs to be looked at when we look at a financial plan in general. We've got to look at the organizational structure and how that's going to all play into the game. Emergency communications plan, self-explanatory, I think. An administrative plan, how are we going to retain records? What process, what software are we going to use? What of any of the pieces that actually the state's coming out with a completely free program, if I remember correctly. They may have a small charge to the communities, but it's much better than the $8,000 system, $8,000 a year system that I just looked at today.
So is that the state of Vermont or the state of New Hampshire?
State of New Hampshire. It was a project that I started before I left the Bureau, and it finally came to fruition this year, I think, with funding. So it may be 2 years out, but it's coming. Risk identification and management, just a risk stratification plan so that we have some idea of where our risks are and where things lie so that we can manage to mitigate them on the far end, or hopefully before we get to the risk itself. Basically, we need to plug the hole in the cheese. A fleet management plan, it's not just when we replace the fleet. It's actually, sorry, I'm going to make myself dizzy if I keep doing that. It's not just when we replace the fleet, it's when we fix the fleet, it's when we do preventative maintenance, it's when we do fleet checks, like do the headlights work, I got a brand new truck that's a year old out here that's had 2 headlights go out in the last 3 months. And we wouldn't have known it if the guys hadn't gone out every morning for every day and checked the headlights. So something that needs to be paid attention to. And then what's the strategic plan? What's the future look like? Where are we headed? And some of that's in the process below. This is just a list. This next thing is just a list of some of the data that we should be looking at. And I certainly, like I said, it's not an exhaustive list, but I think we should absolutely get some input and figure out what other pieces are here. But town demographics, response data from the whole town, what our needed fire flow is of several of our, and something that's not in here actually should be right after needed fire flow, but is hazards, target hazards. Target hazards are an identification process of what our target hazards are and what the needed fire flow are for those particularly, so we can do some pre-planning of those buildings. Current inventory of stuff, water supply systems and locations, what's there, what's available, what current community risk reduction efforts are there, and what, so that we can add to our plan from above, which I didn't put one up there, but okay, we'll figure that out later. Current ISO ratings of all the town's districts. I know North Haverhill's done one recently. I don't have to ask Richie and Jeff if they've done one recently, but those should all come together, and we should start looking at all the pieces that go with that, because there are some significant, go ahead. There are some significant telling pieces with the ISO ratings that will help us walk through some of these pieces and how to actually do a deployment analysis and those kind of things, which is the next thing on the list. Current training, governing documents. Anybody that's ever read an ISO document, you'll recognize many of these because that's where it came from. And then a couple of the RSAs. I didn't put 640 in here because I didn't feel it was particularly subject to this data piece, but it'll be there eventually. Recommended process and suggested activities. So you can forget the suggested activities part because I didn't make it that far, but certainly something that you can all kind of wrap your head around at one point or another. So the organizational overview, basically you take the data and put it all together in an executive summary and wham, you've got an organizational overview. Community-driven strategic planning. So something where we have, where does the community want us to go? Where does the select board want us to go? Where do each of the districts want to go? What's the overall end result that people are looking for? And then we can start looking at the external and the internal stakeholders findings, which will aim us in a direction of, okay, here are the pieces, how do we fill them out so that this is the goal over here, 100 is the goal, and all the numbers in between are the stakeholders findings, and we just have to mesh them all together so they go from 1 to 100 without going from 1 to 90 back to 30 and up to 100. A SWOT analysis, fancy word, fancy term for strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. It comes out of a stakeholder and internal and external stakeholder findings group analysis. Critical issues and service gaps. Where are our service gaps? I've already identified 3 of them that are huge and will take some substantial effort to overcome them and figure out how we're going to deal with them. Strategic initiatives. What are our strategic initiatives are going to be? Community risk reduction needs to be one of them. From the top down, we've got to do community risk reduction, or we're going to have a lot more fires. Goals and objectives development, that comes out of the above stuff. Financial planning kind of works. You'll see in my chart below, you'll see it works from start to finish. Organizational vision, that goes back to that beginning. Where are we headed? What are we looking at? What's the vision of the future? How are we going to get there? Then we got to develop all the plans, put them together and put them out there, and then measure performance. And one of the probably the 13th piece in here is this is all the organizational planning piece. The actual practical part's got to be applied as well. So you end up with, what's the application process? What's the training required to enter look like? What's the training required to get off of probation? What's the training required to be, that's all part of that policy and procedure piece. But we really need to kind of come up with that so we're not putting the cart before the horse. But at the same time, timelines down below are pretty clear that, oh, wrong mouse again. You know, a year is a pretty short amount of time. And we're not even a year, we're only 10 months. But, you know, some of these things can be shortened up, some of them can't. It's, you know, I tried to take into consideration that we're not a professional consultant group that's going to go in and do this and be able to do one thing in a month and come out in 4 months and have a 16-week process that produces a 90-page report. It's going to take some time and some effort, but putting in the organizational overview for a couple of months and those kind of pieces, SWOT analysis, we should be able to take care of in a month at the end of the stakeholders and internal stakeholders findings process, because that's something that's there already. It's just the data plugging it into a piece. And at
John?
that same, yes, ma'am.
Do you think, if you go up a little bit, do you think that the internal and external stakeholders in the SWOT analysis is really going to take 3 months?
I think the compilation and the development, possibly. The other pieces I'm taking into consideration that in July will probably still be under some form of thumb of the government, specifically because this hasn't filtered all through the nation just because we're experiencing the level that we're at. I feel like July and August, we're kind of going to be breaking out of our shell. So
if we did a lot of the preparatory work for an external internal stakeholders event, we could potentially hold that over a period of days, collect the information, and then do your SWOT analysis.
Theoretically, we could do it in a month. It's just a matter of throwing the manpower at it to get it done.
Okay.
And
maybe so. Yeah. Okay.
you know, 2 or 3 public input sessions and 2 or 3 internal sessions to allow, especially if we have to do it via a Zoom meeting or something similar, we want to be able to get the input.
Yep.
The other piece of that is that we could always put out a concurrent survey and
Yep.
get the answers to the specific questions, and that may give us some more filtered information.
Yep. We could do both too. We could hold a couple of Zoom conferences and then a Survey Monkey survey for both internal and external, and then do our SWOT analysis.
Yep. And then, and honestly, the critical issues and service gaps are going to fall right in there, because what's important to the internal and external customers are what are going to show what the critical issues and the service gaps are, on top of what's important to the responding community around us, as far as, you know, how do they get hazardous materials? Well, if Wells River has a hazardous materials event, they're waiting for somebody to come out of Milton, or Windsor. So how does that affect us? Does it affect us? Those are all questions that we need to ask.
And then we probably want to determine if something like that's in the scope of the original organization of the department, or do we tackle that later?
Right, and some of this comes down to what's in the scope of what the committee's doing. You know, are we writing the design of the program of the Haverhill Fire Department, or are we writing the scope of, this is the organizational shell, we're going to hire people into these positions and they're going to do their jobs. And when I say hire, I don't mean full-time, I mean whatever is determined by.
We're going to
the
assign or appoint.
From the perspective that we currently have a wage and hour relationship, there's an employee-employer relationship. So we're all employees. We're not volunteers anymore.
So, and that, I guess I would task the committee to think about that.
Can I jump in for a second? Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
So in looking at this plan, it looks like every firefighter in the town is going to have to reapply for their job. And we're making this plan when only one department's on board right now. There's a chance that the other 2 won't even be on board with this for a year, 2 years, who knows how long? Am I correct in that or not?
I think from my perspective, you're correct. And the fact is that we're building the Haverhill Fire Department, and whether the other 2 precincts come along or not, that's their problem, not ours. You're here as experts for the community in your positions in providing information. And Bridget, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yep.
That's fair enough to me, John, but some of the things that have already been said, like we're not doing inspections, really?
well, we're doing some, but from a town perspective, there are some areas that are lacking in that realm. And I mean,
Yeah, we know, I can speak to that a little bit. So from my office, I think that, you know, we definitely see the Woodsville Fire Department doing some inspections. We've seen some North Haverhill inspections that certainly occur. I don't really hear a lot from Haverhill Corner. I don't know if there's a lot out in Haverhill Corner that requires inspections, but
Bridget,
on the,
can
what's
I
that?
interrupt you just a minute? This is Richard.
Sure, go ahead, Richard.
I do my inspections, but I don't take time. I do the paperwork, but I don't take time to bring it into you. So,
Okay. That's probably why we don't hear
I don't
about it.
get paid for it. I don't want to get paid for it because I feel that that's part of my job. But I do a lot of inspections out in Pike, and I've done some right here in
So I
right
think,
here in Haverhill Corner.
okay, so I think that the point being that, you know, the 3 different fire departments right now are not consistently doing inspections or doing them the same way or following the same process. And I know that from my office, we get questions about inspections, whether inspections have been done, who to call for an inspection, and when an inspection is required. And because the 3 fire departments aren't quite aligned, that can be confusing for people who live in Haverhill. So I just put that out there, that's just a thought with regards to trying to be a little more consistent.
We've had this discussion for years in the town of Haverhill about how to do inspections. We hired an inspector, that didn't work out. We broke down, and each different department came up with their own program, and then the select board shoved one down our throats that didn't work. So we've been all around this issue for years.
Yep.
And I believe if you go back in the minutes, way back a year and a half ago to the fire funding committee, after we discussed wages, the next meeting was going to be the fire inspection program. And the committee just basically dropped dead at that point. Nothing happened. And it wasn't up to we didn't feel that, I'll speak, I hope for both the other fire chiefs, that we didn't feel it was up to us to go to the town or to the committee to push this issue. The committee wanted to set this up. The committee should have come to us. So we're backtracking now to 2 years ago.
so
No,
can I just jump in for a second, Skip?
so can I just say something first? So I just want to make sure everybody's understanding that what we're doing here with this fire committee is developing the town fire department, which at this point in time consists of the North Haverhill Fire Station and its firefighters. So, and with the understanding that in the future, it may include Haverhill Corner and Woodsville. But right now, what we're organizing is a fire department under the umbrella of the town that at this point in time consists of the North Haverhill Fire Station and its firefighters. So you're here as a stakeholder because 1, you're an expert, and 2, because at some point in the future, the people of your precincts might decide to include your fire station under this umbrella. So what we decide for this committee, for the town fire department, will be how the town's fire department operates. But until your fire station, or if your fire station ever comes under the umbrella, only at that point in time would it apply to you. Does that make sense, Richard and Jeff?
I guess.
I'm still thinking about that. Bridget.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it too, because I mean, as non-stakeholders right now, and possibly, potentially not ever a stakeholder, who knows what's going to happen in the future. It's kind of hard to sit here and digest all this when we don't even know if we're going to play part of this.
Well, that's understandable. So again, you're experts, that's why you're here, and you are stakeholders because whether your station becomes a part of this fire department of the town in the future or not, you will be interacting with this particular fire department like you do today. That makes you a stakeholder. You still have to work together.
And just to add to that, I mean, the 3 of us chiefs have worked really well together for years since we all came on board. This thing in the town of Haverhill has gone on for, I mean, I'm 38 years now. It's gone on forever. We finally all started working together, and then people wanted to develop change for the departments. I mean, I go back to when we bought air packs for the town. We saved the town over $30,000 by doing a group purchase. All three departments got together, decided how many we needed, and we did that. Then we went to the town as a group, and we've got the potential to continue doing that no matter what happens. So I mean, I think we've worked very well together over the last 4 or 5 years to bring the town, the three fire departments, closer together. But I do know that this whole town-wide thing, the way it's been brought out in the and presented, is driving a wedge into the town. The three departments, it's driving a wedge in.
Why is that?
I don't think I really have the answer to that. I just know that it's very evident that there's a wedge there, and why, I don't know. I think part of it is the three chiefs all have different. We have different areas to fight fire. We all have different. Like I have a hydrant system. Richie has mostly rural fire water supply. North Haverhill's got a little bit of both. Okay, so we all have different tactics and things we have to use, and when stuff's all brought together, I think that it's like, you don't know what we do all the time. He doesn't know what we do all the time, and it's just. I think maybe it's just because it's new and people aren't used to it yet. But I think that it has definitely driven a wedge in.
Well, hopefully our work here will help bridge that gap.
Well, let's see what happens. Yeah,
We feel the same. We feel the same way down in Haverhill Corner. This is really took a effect down here. My guys are pretty upset about it.
And so, like I said, I'm really hoping that the work that we're doing and the information that is presented in these meetings is making its way into the public, making its way out to the people of Haverhill Corner and to Woodsville, so that, because a lot of what I have heard is not accurate, and that I think is causing a lot of the wedge and the discontent is the misinformation that's out there. And so I'm really hoping that all of you can go back and talk about the things that are being planned and that we're talking about, and that's being worked on by the people in this committee and others in your fire departments, so that that accurate information can get out there and people can make decisions that are best for them based on accurate information. So I'm hoping that happens, but we'll do our best to get that out there and make sure that people are aware that this is a collaborative committee. And as of right now, it includes the North Haverhill Fire Station. And I know that Haverhill Corner still has not had, neither is Woodsville, but Haverhill Corner still has a question on the warrant as to whether the people of Haverhill Corner want to include their fire station in this town-wide fire department, which would make them a direct stakeholder.
Misinformation.
But we'll see.
What needs to happen though is everybody needs to keep in mind that there's look just Booth just gave us. There's a pile of information. This seems almost daunting and quite frankly impossible when you look at it in the spreadsheet. There's a lot there. But together we're stronger. If you don't put the community's needs and the community's best interest at heart, this gets very convoluted and it does drive a wedge. But if we remember that we're trying to come together to build something better, if we can, we haven't looked at every avenue. The way we're doing it now might be the best way possible. But for us to be obtuse and have blinders on and say that this way is the way we've always done it, it's going to be perfect, doesn't work anymore in today's day and age. There's too many different things in the fire service. So I hate that there's a wedge here. That was one of my cons. I feel like I've almost lost good friends over this. My entire point is that if we can make the entire town of Haverhill stronger, how do we do that? And let's do it. You know, we can write articles in the newspaper back and forth until I'm blue in the face. My whole point is that I know I'm stronger with Richard and all his guys, and I know I'm stronger with Jeff and all his guys. This isn't a separation of fire service, because we still do it together. We've always done it together. I think we've done it together as the 3 chiefs you have now better than, you know, they probably have in the past, you know. We've come a long ways, and I don't want anybody to think, because we're going over this entire list here, that this is a division of service, because it's certainly not. My ultimate goal is cohesion of our service we provide now. The town of Haverhill is very fortunate for what they have now. I think they get fire service at a premium rate compared to other communities. In my world, I'm never satisfied. I always want to look to see what's better. How can we improve? And the only way we're going to do that is together. I know that I had a pile of questions from my guys when this rolled out, and as leaders, we need to make sure that we're giving them the accurate information, and we need to leave the inaccurate stuff that's out in town. I've heard all kinds of stuff that is, some of it's not even on this planet for what could even remotely happen. But if we come together now and we move forward, there's some of this stuff that we're going to skip over, and there's some of this stuff that's not going to have a whole lot of effect on us. And there's some good stuff in here that we can change and make the town of Haverhill's fire service better. But we need to remember that we're at plan A right now, and it is just with North Haverhill right now. I get that. And there's a potential that Woodslow's obviously going to keep saying no. They already said no this year, and Haverhill Corner hasn't had their vote yet. But what I don't want to happen is to lose any more friends or firemen that we've been working together over a plan to be better. I mean, we need to look at the big picture. How do we get better than we are now? And I think everything will work out. So I don't want anybody to freak out over John's done an extensive list here. He's done a phenomenal job. This is all stuff that at some point we should have. Like he said, this isn't going to happen by March. It's just not. You know, everybody's got a life and a job and a world, and we're not full-time firemen here. But I don't think John was expressing that this needs to be done by March. And if you look at his time plan, this might take a couple of years. Nobody's set that yet. But we're in the second meeting, and I can feel the tension already. And I'm not a huge fan of the tension between departments, because if I have a fire tonight in North Haverhill, Richard's coming, Jeff's coming, all your people are coming. I certainly don't want people showing up to a fire scene in a town that I'm responsible for now and being angry because we're trying to move the fire service forward. So there's my soapbox. I love you guys, always have. I think that sometimes when they breed on that negativity. We haven't had a lot of calls lately. We're not seeing each other right now because of COVID. We haven't trained together in some time now. But if you guys think back to when we burned a house on Airport Road, I don't think anybody was unhappy with the other departments that day. And that's what happens when we go for this long stretch without seeing each other or being able to work together.
So I got a question for you, Philip.
Hit me, Richie.
All right, so down the road, say like 5 or 6 years, we do build one department and in North Haverhill. So do you feel that you're gonna have, and if they don't have our department down here, do you feel you're gonna have the manpower, as much manpower as you do now?
I think that when you look at it from the onset, that where we are now, it wouldn't be feasible to not have a department down there. As far as having more manpower, you can combine all the manpower in the town of Haverhill now by a yes vote, and I can tell you that we have 70 firemen in the town of Haverhill.
We do.
The question is how fast can you get a truck to the call? So if you look at the demographics of the town, you'd look at the run volume, the response times, the manpower, where everybody is situated. You know, unfortunately for you, you probably have less people living in your town than North Haverhill might have or Woodsville might have. So I don't necessarily look at it as we'd have more manpower. We need to look at it as where can we put people and how can we put trucks in the entire town to get the quickest response, and that's what the taxpayers deserve. So I don't want anybody to think that, you know, I'm behind shutting down Haverhill Corner Fire Department, because I'm certainly not. It doesn't make any financial sense at this point, or, you know, I don't know all your statistics, Richard, but if you have a fire on the commons, I'm sure your truck's going to beat any other truck. You know, that's the stuff to look at. You know, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves when we get a little bit of fear on this huge change, but Haverhill Corner Fire Department's been there for how many years now for a reason. North Haverhill's been where we are for a reason, and Woodsville's been where they are for a reason. My ultimate goal is that, you know, and I talked to a retired full-time fire guy today that lives in town, and, you know, he was talking about going to calls and such, and, well, you don't have to worry about it because you have mutual aid. And don't take this statement as downplaying anything around us, but from everything I read and everything I'm seeing and the changes I've seen in my 17 years is the town of Haverhill needs to build this fire department, however it may look, whether it's 3 stations, 3 chiefs, 1, whatever it is, because I don't know. The town of Haverhill needs to build a fire department that can sustain on its own, because I really don't think in 10 years mutual aid is going to be an option for anybody. These smaller fire departments are struggling just like we are today. The price of equipment is rising. The price of trucks is rising. And in another 10 years, you might not have 20 fire departments in 20 communities. You might have 8 that cover 20 communities or 5 that cover 20 communities. So I think as a taxpayer, somebody that's lived in Haverhill my whole life, as a fire chief, somebody that doesn't plan on moving, I want to build this to be a self-sustaining department. So at least I know that the town of Haverhill is covered. So as far as manpower, you know, again, Richard, I don't think that you can close a station and, you know, say everybody you have quits because you close your station. There's no way I'm going to have more manpower in North Haverhill. I'm more worried about how many manpower do we have in Haverhill Corner. You got guys now that we got to retain these people. We can't lose them.
Yeah.
And this isn't something that's North Haverhill or Haverhill Corner or Woodsville. These are all feasibility studies for consolidation of fire departments in the eastern seaboard of the United States. I mean, this is not something that we're the only ones looking at. This is huge across the country. And while I got the microphone, let me just say that Jeff and Richie, I was not intending on insulting anybody individually. I reached out to some stakeholders. I spoke with somebody that works within a high risk community building in our community, and that individual said they've had 3 different inspectors in that building, and 2 of them do the inspections. 1 of them sits down and has coffee and signs the piece of paper. That's not okay. That's not okay, whether it's in one building or all the buildings in town. And that's that. I dropped one experience that I got from a community stakeholder, and I'm sorry if it pissed somebody off. I probably should have kept it general. But let me, since I've only got 9 more minutes, let me line back.
I'm glad I don't drink coffee.
It's not you then.
So, I mean, the rest of this just lines out, and you can see that financial planning goes through the whole thing. Organizational vision probably goes through the whole thing. Performance management, you can see at the end is, I mean, that's an outshot. That's 5 years. And now I'll shut up.
So I got a question, one question for you, John. I heard that you and St. Johnsbury and Lindenville had been working, but Lindenville doesn't want to do this. Is this true?
No. Lindenville is bought in. Lindenville, the town of St. Johnsbury, Barnet, Waterford, Danville, Concord, Groton, and I'm missing somebody. But those 7 or 8 communities have come together and all put in about $3,000 to pay. We just awarded a contract for a regional fire protection study, which is going to basically do all of the steps that I just said for $40,000-ish.
So you are working on that up there then?
Yeah, 16 weeks. We should have the result from that, and the goal is to go to the legislature next year. I don't know if that's going to happen, but the hope is that we'll move on having some legislation at least proposed next year if we decide to move forward. That's what the regionalization study is for. But if we can propose some legislation next year and it gets shot down, we can go 2 years out and we'll have a safety net.
Is Waterford on that too?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And NVDA is driving that bus. None of the towns are.
Okay.
All right. Are there any other questions for John? He laid out a lot, so hopefully over the next couple of weeks, you guys can look over the documents that he put together and have questions for the next meeting. I just want to take a look at the agenda real quick. So we had the mission statement, the purpose. Do we want to look at the specific purpose? Let's do that. John, do you want to bring back up your purpose statement so that we
Yep.
can refine that to be what the group wants it to be so that we have a purpose for this committee?
Sure, I just got to be able to find it. Oh, where'd you go? Share screen.
All right, so,
Number 1 and number 2 right here.
yep. So when I read them originally, I thought number 2, I mean, I think that certainly for the fire department itself, number 1 applies. But for this committee and the purpose of this committee for the next year is to develop the organizational structure in general, as well as the financial structure of the new fire department. I envision some of the other work that you've put down your list coming out of that organizational structure after it's developed. So, you know, you would, and this is just my thought. I would love to hear from the rest of the committee. But I think number 2 more speaks to what this committee's purpose is. It's the purpose of the Town of Haverhill Fire Department Organizational Committee to examine the facts, solicit opinions of the public for the purposes of developing a town fire department and all-encompassing structural elements to deliver a superiorly efficient and fiscally responsible service to the residents and visitors of our community. So the goal of this committee is to develop the department and the organizational and financial structure of that department so that it can then move forward and do some of this other work. And if anybody has another thought on that, I'd love to hear it. If anybody doesn't like the way this is worded, we can reword it. We can add to it.
So the 2 things I thought of real quick off the top of my head were number 2 is the first one I wrote. Number 1's the second one I wrote, because number 2 is more of a mission statement. It says what we're going to do versus what do we do. And that's why I made the adjustment.
Well, and I actually like it. Like if we can add number 1 to the back end of number 2. So the purpose of the department is the purpose of the organizational committee is to examine all of this information and develop the organizational structure of the new fire department for the purpose of affecting positive and up-to-date change in the delivery of public services within the town of Haverhill. Does that make sense? So obviously you want to be able to provide, you know, like if we're going to do this, it's going to have a positive effect and you're going to instill, you know, like implement up-to-date changes to the way that we do things today.
I think that another aspect of this, in like Chief Robbins hit on, and obviously Chief Morris hit on, I think the town's got to come to a point where the select board and you, Bridget, decide, you know, we've always talked about we're putting the cart before the horse before we even started this committee, but what are we going to do and how's it going to look if Haverhill Corner does vote no, Woodslow's voted no for next year? I think that we need to spend a little bit of time determining how one department's going to look under this plan. You know, we're basing everything, even in the following year, that Haverhill Corner is going to vote yes and Woodslow's going to vote yes. And the year after that, they are, if they do vote no. So I'm not trying to, of anybody, I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer or hold this up. I want to press forward, but.
No, I really think this committee needs to focus on this being the town-wide fire department, regardless of who's a participant. You know, so right now,
there's a lot of aspects of that statement, though. I mean, if North Haverhill's the only one in there, is North Haverhill a town-wide fire department at that point?
it would be.
So that needs to be, I think that we need to discuss that, maybe not tonight, but in the future, everybody needs to absorb that. You know, John and I spoke about that earlier to great length. And again, without driving the wedge, without me losing any more of my fire friends, I understand that when North Haverhill's under the town, what that would implicate. I don't want that to come as Phil Blanchard's trying to conquer the world, the universe again, because quite frankly, I've had enough of hearing that. Phil Blanchard's trying to conquer the fire department in the town of Haverhill being the best it can be. The real fact, I think, and the elephant in the room is that if North Haverhill is the town-wide fire department, as it would be, and I think as it's covered as an RSA, how is that going to look with the committee going forward? You know, if the town of Haverhill keeps having these precincts continually voting no with misinformation or what have you, and all the work we're going to put into this, at what point is the town going to step back and say, the town of Haverhill is not going to fund a precinct? We're going to fund the town fire department, which at this point would only be North Haverhill.
North Haverhill Station. Yep.
Correct. And I'm not trying to be, you know, disrespectful. I'm looking out for Jeff and Richard in this statement.
And
But-
I can honestly say at this point in time, I don't know how to answer that question because we're not there yet. And,
I
you know,
understand.
so it's a decision that the town as a whole is going to have to make in a year or 2 years when this.
What I don't want to see is that decision being made and anybody thinking it came from left field. I want to be as open as we possibly can with Richard and Jeff, love them both. I don't want to see in a year from now, the town saying we're not going to fund a precinct now, and it's not their faults. It's not the fire chief's responsibility to accept that their precinct voted no. I don't want them to feel like they're on an island any more than they already do.
Yep.
Ready to come together and press forward, but I want them to also understand, as we're telling people to vote no for this stuff, there's the potential, correct? That if North Haverhill's voted yes, we are the town's fire department at that point.
The North Haverhill Fire Station and the North Haverhill Precinct agreed to join under the umbrella of the town of Haverhill's fire department, which makes you now, because you're the only participant, the town's fire department.
So my
Yes.
last soapbox for the night, I promise, would be to Richard and Jeff, that that's the reality that we're facing, and it's not negative. If we do this together, I think it could be really phenomenal. And I know you guys can't sway a precinct vote, but I think we need to talk to our members and understand that together we can make this really, really great and nobody's going to lose anything. But if we hold back and we, you know, the redundancy of service thing that's been in the paper killed me. Yes, every fire truck has a nozzle on it. That's not the redundancy of service that I've ever spoke about, or I think anybody else has spoke about. The redundancy of service is that if you get an extra set of gear, Richie, and I get a new guy on, I want to be able to use your gear. If you get 5 guys on and I lose 5, I want you to be able to use my gear. You know, our gear's different and the names on it, I get that, but together we can work to make that the same. What I don't want to see is this press forward. Everybody pours in hours and hours of time here like we are tonight. And the town to say, you know what, we're not going to fund a precinct fire department anymore. And then you guys are like super on the island. You're like Tom Hanks looking for your volleyball and screaming to Wilson. I would rather do this stuff together. And I know that you've had some members, Richard, express their side in the paper, but where I'm sitting, and I want to be as vocal and open as I can because I haven't talked to you in so long, is, and Jeff knows, this is not North Haverhill against anybody. North Haverhill just happens to be in the center, and I was for this. You know, there's no secret to that, and I've been vocal about it. But I'm gonna go ahead and on the record right now and tell you that the reverse end of this, if we keep voting no and not coming together, just to eliminate. You want to talk about redundancy? Having a precinct in charge of the fire department that passes through the town, that's redundant. If we want to eliminate a redundancy, let's just get all under one blanket and come together and form the best plan together to move forward. My biggest fear is that we're going to drive an even bigger wedge in between everybody by moving forward and not coming to the realization that North Haverhill is under the town. And I am pro town. I was one of the biggest ones to push for this. There's no secret there, but I don't want this to turn out to be, oh, look where we are now a year later and the town's saying that we're not going to fund precincts. The town doesn't have to fund the precinct for anything. They never have. When the new plan came out to fund the fire departments through the town, that was for all the stakeholders and taxpayers townwide to have an equal representation. I think that we're going very off tangent talking about, you know, stations being shut down and whatnot. That we're not there yet.
No.
I would also step in and say that as a Pike resident, it drives me absolutely insane that I pay tax dollars that pay for a fire truck that we give to a precinct and no longer have ownership of. Insane. Because
How can you say that, John? You put money in your funds each year. There's $20,000 from the town.
so yeah, exactly. We give. It doesn't come back. The control of it doesn't come back to the town. So that
We do. I do the same thing for North Haverhill and Woodsville.
absolutely. I'm not saying anything different. It's no different than if the town of Waterford gave us a fire truck. For what purpose? I don't know. And it as a taxpayer, that double layer of government drives me insane. And that's probably that's just me talking as a taxpayer. Having a multi-layered government is one of the most inefficient models in the world. And if you look at it, just look at our federal government versus our state government, this whole coronavirus bullshit. We are completely layered, and we can't get anything because the federal government's getting all of the stuff and they're hijacking what they don't get. So, now add to that a micro layer of a precinct government, and you're adding another substantial level of government to control an organization. And the failure to the community is that we now have 3 fire chiefs sitting on this phone call, 2 of which are visibly irritated. And that's a perfect example of the fact that we created a monster. And to uncreate that monster, we have to let our pride go. And it's one of 2 things that drives the irritation. It's either pride or ego, and I prefer to think that it's pride. And we all have a lot of pride in our communities. I have a lot of pride in Wells River. It's where I grow up. It's where my trucks are. I went and helped them load their brand new fire truck. Was I a member? No, but I went to help them because I spent 20 years scrubbing that damn fire truck that they retired. And Raisin looked at me when I was 13 or 14, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was scrubbing that fire truck, and I was pissed off because they were all drinking something in the back room. And I was like, what is this? And he said, this is a team. And the team, when that truck retires, you're going to see it go down the road in pristine condition because you spent the time out here scrubbing that truck. And guess what? The last time I saw it in the Reigate Fire Station, it's in great condition. 21, 22, 23, actually 28 years later, it's in great condition, and it's sitting in another firehouse serving another town because we took the time as a team to work through that fire department piece of taking care of our apparatus. And that may be a very simplified message, but in the same aspect, I only see 6 people. Sorry about the other people, but I see 3 fire chiefs that work great together. I've sat in several meetings with you guys and talked about this exact subject. And there's obviously going to be frustration, and I get that. But at the end of the day, as a taxpayer from the community, we need to bring the control back to a centralized organization that actually utilizes the funds that they gain for maximum benefit for our tax dollars. And that is the vehicle that's going to drive this forward, regardless of whether any of us care otherwise, because as soon as you sit in front of a taxpayer and say, your dollars are being misspent because I have to spend it 3 times instead of once, what are they going to say? And we can lobby all day long and every day. I do it here for $1.3 million. I do it for $1,300,090 something dollars. And we're losing. We look forward at the fact that the town of St. Albans cut their career fire department and saved $1 million and put it into economic development and grew their grand list by over $4 or $6 million. And that economic development actually allows for the consistent growth of the new services to the community, but it completely decimated a fire department. And we're on the same trajectory here as a career department. So if they cut $800,000 or $900,000 out of my budget, what am I going to do? I got $1.3 million in just staffing costs. Well, it's going to go back to being a call department, but we can't do that because the surrounding communities are so reliant on us. Hence why we brought in other departments. We're looking at 200 square miles to cover. We're talking about a small community of what, 50 square miles? And we can't come together with the fact that we need to work together as a team to develop something that is more cost efficient and taxpayer safe.
Well said. Thank you, John. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to the conversation before we move on?
Just quick, like, I guess, Bridget, if the taxpayers of the town spoke at town meeting, in terms of a majority want one fire department. I think the taxpayers have spoken already. I don't think it's a matter of going to the taxpayers and asking them. The taxpayers have already spoken.
They did. They spoke when they voted to do this. So, you know, at town meeting, the town of Haverhill at large voted to create a townwide fire department. So from that perspective, yes, the town has spoken.
But we get wound up in the one department, like Darwin said. So in my eyes right now, to start, one department can be on a sheet of paper. It's up to this committee and the fire chiefs to drive that and determine how that looks.
Yes,
So,
Yes, that's the
I don't
point of
wanna-
this committee. Yes.
correct. So I think there's too much fear that when we say one department, for some reason it's going to land in North Haverhill. I think firefighter Smith said, well, one of the ideas was to have fire departments on the outliers of town. Absolutely. You could absolutely cover the town of Haverhill from putting a fire department in Haverhill Corner and in Woodsville and covering the town.
And I think that it's really important to put it out there that a big component of doing an analysis about fire service in the town of Haverhill is to determine where you need those services to reside. And I think, you know, to say at this point, or to tell the public that, you know, this committee's intent is to close down fire stations and, you know, kick people off fire departments or whatever is being said out there is not accurate. And you know, the goal of this committee is to determine, you know, what fire service and what fire services are needed. And just because you have one fire department does not mean you have one station. And I know it's hard to wrap your mind sometimes around if you have one department, because we call your department a department and Richard's department a department and Jeff's department a department. But under the blanket of the town's fire department, there would be multiple stations. It's, I don't think, and I think John just pointed out the current ISO ratings. I mean, that's really going to drive that. It's going to tell us where we need to have those services. And so to tell the public that we're going to shut down stations, it's just irresponsible at this point in time, because we have not determined, we haven't even come close to starting down that road of deciding, you know, where services need to be able to provide the best fire service possible in the town of Haverhill. So, you know,
And I think that where we get off tangent is that, you know, we keep speaking about, you don't know what you're going to get. Well, and I said it was my last soapbox before, but again, this comes back to that I want to be great friends with the other two fire chiefs, but when we have people writing articles that you don't know what you're going to get, the trouble is that nobody knows what they have now. And all we're doing is examining that. And I can tell you that from where I sit, even as a taxpayer, as long as the truck's moving, we're staffed and we're trained, I don't think we're going to have any issues, and we're going to be a lot stronger to, you know, tackle that issue. What we're talking about is efficiencies, and we're talking about how do we maximize our group purchasing efforts, and on. You know, we've talked about the list 1,000 times, but we can't keep talking about we don't know what the town's going to give us. Well, what the town gives you now is 3 fire departments. Essentially, it's one, but it just split 3 ways. You know, so I really hope we can end the comments in the paper and whatnot about we don't know what the town's going to give us. The town's given us a fire department for years.
and like you pointed out, you know, Phil, you pointed out at your annual meeting, the district annual meeting, you know, you're certainly not going to get less than what you're getting today. And that would never be the goal of any committee, is to give you less than what you've got today. And so, you know, the goal of the committee is to do just what John put in the purpose statement, is to be more efficient, more effective, and to provide improved services, period. And however that is, however that sugars out, whether, you know, we can find financial efficiencies, but certainly to provide equal or better services is one of the goals. So
There's a potential that everybody's been doing such a great job now that there's going to be very minimal changes.
And I think the key is to remember a couple of things, and one of them, shoot, I just pulled my battery up. One of them is that that document started with a blank piece of paper, and we can choose to stand on the bridge and look up the stream and take all the water in our mouth, or we can choose to turn down the stream and actually watch the future take place. There is not anything mentioned of Woodsville or Haverhill Corner or North Haverhill in that document, nowhere. And the reason is because it started with a blank piece of paper in a blank mind. And I sat down with 7 or 8 or more documents from other communities that did very similar things. And I started pouring through them and saying, okay, what worked here, what worked here, what worked here, what didn't work here, and built a plan for a blank organization that is no different than if I were building a new organization in St. Johnsbury. I would bring in the stakeholders from around me and say, hey, Chief Zhang, hey, Chief Cochran, what do you want out of this organization? And building it from there. And I think that specifically our next meeting, we should probably come into it with a mindset that we're focused on looking down the river and building the future and not taking on water from the above. We have a group of assets that have been relinquished to the town for the town's control. The town does not have a department that can run those because it's never been done before. And it's our goal as a group to develop that organization to be able to run those assets. It doesn't matter whose assets they are. They're the town of Haverhill's. They aren't the North Haverhill fire districts. They're not the Haverhill Corner fire districts. They're not Pikes. They're not Mountain Lakes. They are the town of Haverhill's assets. And it's up to the town of Haverhill to run them with the least amount of risk and the least, or the highest level of frugality. And that's what this group's job is to do, is to build that organizational shell to say, this is how the town of Haverhill is going to run it. And we have the capability of having 3 really smart chiefs that have had a lot of years of experience within the community to be able to help us build what this organizational shell is and to move forward and look down that river instead of taking on water. I hate drowning. It's my biggest fear.
Thanks, John.
So a lot's been said, and we've got a lot to think about. I think maybe we need to step away and ponder it and move along on the agenda.
Yep.
That'd be my
That's fine.
recommendation.
Darwin,
That's fine.
not to hold you up on moving forward. It's Mike. I wasn't going to say anything, but Johnny, you did a good job. That's a hell of an outline. And I think if nothing else, every department should be following something like that. But Bridget, I had spoken to you earlier about how there are questions.
Yep.
And they haven't gotten the answers. And I know that moving down the agenda, hopefully we're going to get to hear from the 3 chiefs.
We are.
What they felt as pros and cons. And I think that will give us some new direction on maybe what we need to answer.
Sure.
Because I think they all have legitimate points. I think that the town, listen, I've said it before, I don't think we need 3 police departments. So I think we're definitely talking in the right direction. But I want to hear what those chiefs are going to tell me are the cons as to doing it. When we've heard from Johnny with the outline of consistency from leadership, training, inspections. We've lacked consistency in inspections. Everybody's rattling off the years. I've been over 45 years, 26 as a chief. So probably I outran everybody right there, but I'm just saying. I that, have it, Mike.
I have,
You're gonna make it more than 26 years?
no, but I'm 48 years on the department,
Oh,
so.
okay, I'll concede. So I just think that those guys are gonna have points that we're gonna be able to address. And that is going to make it, on my end, thinking about the vote coming up down here, how critical some of the answers or the pros and cons will be as to whether the precinct moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We're definitely going to get there. Next on our agenda is I wanted to just show you really quickly that I added a page to our website. Can you see the Town of Haverhill's website?
Yep.
Okay. So if you go to fire departments, Haverhill Fire Departments, I've added this Haverhill Fire Department and just kind of tried to give, you know, an overview of how we got to where we are today, when you are all meeting every other week on Tuesday nights at 6:30, who the members are, so that people can reach out to you if they have questions or want more information or need some guidance on how to find minutes or those sorts of things. And then I'm going to actually add the minutes to the bottom of this page so people can go back and read what was addressed at each meeting. And we can also add other documents to this page. John had mentioned maybe putting some documents out on the website. So I think that once we get our mission and our purpose developed, they should definitely be added to this web page. And then we'll start to publicize it more so people can come here and look at what we're doing and see what our mission and our purpose are and the work that we're doing, so that they can keep up on it and be in the know of the efforts of this department. So I just wanted to show you that. That's right on the Town of Haverhill's website under fire departments. Everybody good with that?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Bridget.
Okay. So next on the agenda is next steps. So the next steps will be for you all to go back and read again what John has put out there for the purpose and outline, as well as the mission statement that was provided by Mark and Bob. Bob. My mind went completely blank.
Yeah.
And I'll send out the minutes to this meeting, and then we can start to decide maybe at the next meeting where we want to go with this, where our next step is. But
Well, I want to interject here. I want to say that it was really quite striking how close John's concept of purpose for this met with Bob's and my mission statement, because they really are in line. And Bob and I, representing Mountain Lakes, all we want is a department that works together, that shares equipment, that shares best practices, that makes the best use of the budgets that we have, and that everybody has coverage for fires that happen. That's really all we want, and everybody to be happy. Matter of fact, we're thinking that we anticipate all three departments, all three stations being part of this plan. And we'd be quite surprised if one department, one station, it went away, personally. So that's our input from Mountain Lakes.
yep, very nice. Thank you.
I agree with that.
All right. So
Yeah.
next on, oh, go ahead.
You agree with that? You agree with what Mark said?
Who's that?
This is
Who are you
Richard.
asking?
Yeah. I'm asking Jeff if he agrees what Mark just said.
Oh, absolutely. The goal is to work together. We always have done. That's been our goal. And like I said, we've done that pretty well. Yeah, absolutely. And we share resources, and I'm sure we'll continue to do that down the road, no matter what the outcome of the votes are down the road.
Okay. So along the lines of what Mike was saying a little bit ago, we're at the point in the agenda where we want member comments. So last meeting, the fire chiefs were tasked with going back to their fire stations and working with their firefighters to come up with a list of pros and cons. And I think that's good for, if we want to, I don't know who wants to start. Richard, do you want to start with the
Nope.
pros
I'll
and
let
cons?
Philip start. Philip, you start.
Want Phil
You're
to
younger
start?
than I am.
So
Okay.
do we all want to go through cons and pros, or do you want to do each one for each chief?
Let's go each chief. You were
Okay.
asked to go back to your firefighters, so I feel like you're bringing to the table whatever your firefighters wanted us to know. So
And the hardest part about that is I haven't had the chance to see everybody yet, but I can tell you that I think I'm going to speak for a majority of them. But when and I still call him chief because Mike was a chief for a long time, but when Chief Lavoy tasked us with pros and cons, I'll be completely honest with you, I felt like I was in fourth grade again. So I had to take a little bit of time. I can tell you that, and I yell at my guys for this, but I'm going to answer a question with a question, and this comes from Chief Bouffard as well after my talk with him. Instead of looking at pros and cons, the purpose and the mission, and I think the vision of this committee is going to be, is can anybody tell me why what we're doing now is perfect? And I think that we can all poke holes in that and determine that it's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. So I think for me, and one of the things that drove me to support some of this, I can see the town of Haverhill as having 70 or 80 firemen. I'm not sure the exact number. But when we look at it individual precinct wise, the town of Haverhill doesn't have 70 or 80 firemen because we're driving a wedge in between us again. Ultimately, we have 80 firemen or whatever the number is going to be. So my biggest pro to all this is working together. Is we're not individualized and we're not separate as far as manpower. I can tell you that when we do this study, and I'm just a volunteer fire chief, our biggest issue moving forward with how we're going to form anything or how it's going to look is staffing. And staffing's uncontrollable to a certain degree, and it's uncontrollable because we don't have a lot of jobs in the town of Haverhill anymore where all our members are in town working on farms and the owner of the farm says, oh, you had a fire call, go. We have people that even if they work in the town of Haverhill might not be able to respond to a call. So my biggest pro is that if I only got 2 guys in town, but Jeff's got 15 in town, and we're all one, I can use Jeff's guys. And he'll tell you, and Richard's going to tell you that we've talked about working together like this for a long time. So this isn't new to us. We have to get to the point, whether it's through this committee forming, whether it's from one department or the precincts relinquishing, where we put the residents of our town first. And in the beginning of this, when Mike and Doug Dutel and Albanessis were talking, and we're talking about new leadership and stuff, I got to tell you, it didn't sit well with me. I've worked extremely hard to get my people and myself where I am. I'm still learning every day. My biggest con of this is not knowing how it's going to turn out. So I agree with everybody that says, we don't know where this is going to go. We don't. But through a little mentorship that I have, and with some guys that have a lot more time on than I do, this isn't about Phil Blanchard or his title. This isn't about anybody, any one of my officers that have a title. This is ultimately about providing the best service we can to our citizens. So my pro is if we put this all together and we work together and drive this forward, we're going to have one hell of a fire department in the town of Haverhill. And I think Twin State as a mutual aid organization now probably looks at the town of Haverhill and knows that we're a force and we're there to help. And you want to call the Haverhill guys. We have well-trained individuals. We have a lot of people. But my biggest con is, and I'll agree, is we don't know where it's going to go. But I can tell you that I don't know where it's going to go, North Haverhill being singular in this equation. I can tell you that if we were all 3 combined in the way the chiefs work together, that would be a pro, because I can tell you where it's going to go, because, you know, together, I don't think there's anything that's going to stop us. I don't want to list 100 pros and I don't want to list 100 cons, but if you take anything away, my pro is that combined, we're way stronger. And the town of Haverhill is more fortunate to use everybody's members and all their skills and assets and qualifications to respond to any hazard we have in the town of Haverhill. And my biggest con is we don't know together, and you know, it's driving a wedge, and we're putting silos up again that we work very hard to tear down.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil.
All right,
Jeff,
Rich, Jeff's older than Richard, so Richard's got to go now.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Richard?
gosh. All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So my pros are to cover the town with building inspections. So what my thing is, I thought we was all right now doing okay. I mean, Jeff, you do yours. Philip, you do yours, and I do the ones down here. So what's wrong with that?
That's a question?
Yes.
Anybody want to answer that?
I'm a little confused, Richard. So that was a pro?
Yeah.
Oh, what you're doing now, you're saying is a pro?
Yeah, well, I mean, if it closing the town, I wrote this stuff out. Closing. Oh, so if Woodsville doesn't go along with this for the town inspections, how's that gonna work?
Well, Woodsville will
Jeff,
continue
how's
to
that
do
gonna
their,
work?
they would continue to do their own inspections.
Okay,
Think broader base though, Richard. I think that you doing your inspections, Jeff doing his, and myself doing mine is a perfectly good laid plan. As far as pros and cons on combining services though, we can choose how that looks if we do choose to combine. So, big picture pros and cons of combining. What are we going to gain? What are we going to lose? Obviously, we've dealt with some cons together because I haven't talked to you in 3 months. So
yeah.
that would be a con for me.
So let's just say that, have you ever gone to like Jeff and asked him anything on inspections?
We bounce stuff off each other all the time.
Yeah, okay, which is good. Good.
Yeah, just like me and you have done before.
Yeah. The cons. So it'd be, if we go one department, it'd be your payroll. Say like if you have a big, like let's just say if you had a chimney fire and you had 40 guys there, you're going to pay them guys $15 to $20 an hour.
No, I
Figure
think
that out. Figure
Well,
that out. For 40 guys.
And I understand where you're coming from as far as if everybody got toned to the same call, but the potential for that happening is still pretty slim. What we would look at is the staffing that we have during the day, during the night, during the weekends, and you'd have to analyze where we need the most help. But certainly the town's not going to want to pay 50 firemen to go to every call in the town of Haverhill because payroll, it'd be drastically increased. As far as combining, that's something that you would look at. I totally understand where you're coming from because I still get the question on, I've had selectmen that I've talked to, and you got to limit how many calls people go to, and in the next breath, well, if they don't go to 30% of the calls, they shouldn't be on the fire department. Well, I can tell you how we cover calls is by not telling a single person they can't come to one, because if you told me on one call I couldn't come, you're probably not going to see me again. So, that would be a con to look at, Richard, because I can't even imagine the payroll if every member in the town of Haverhill went to every call. But what I hope for, and this is just me speaking, I'm not speaking for the committee or the town, but what I hope for is that you always have enough people at every call. So how do we get there? So, in all reality, if we had 40 people at every call, that's not a terrible con. It's going to cost a lot of money, but at least we'd have a bunch of help to work with.
Well, so what's interesting is that, and I don't know if John can speak to this at all, or maybe Phil or Jeff can, or maybe even Richard. When my mother and father used to work EMS on the ambulance squad, and they had on-call shift schedules. So my mom and my father, they both knew exactly when they were on call. They weren't on call 24/7. They were on call certain days of the week for certain periods of time.
And I can speak to that, Bridget.
Go ahead.
That the way that things are set up now on individual departments, that'd be almost impossible. But when we get into the on-call stuff on EMS, it's probably, I don't know where they lived or where they were working, but it was probably in an area that EMS calls are generally more right now than fire calls. So they might have the ability to set that up. The flip side of that is the staffing might have been so low that they had to set it up to know that an ambulance would be covered. And we're talking a couple of people go in and they can handle a call with two. When we have a fire call, probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, Boof, but, and Jeff and Richard even, 90% of the time we get a little bit of information on what we're responding to, but you have no idea what you're going to deal with until you get there. For us to limit the town to staffing one truck to handle a call, in most cases will probably work out perfectly fine because smells and bells or a car accident might be able to be handled with 4 or 5 guys or 10 guys. But, you know, the Lebanon fire guys will tell you they went to a Smells and Bells and opened the door and it elicited a propane explosion that almost killed 2 guys.
Right.
I don't want the purpose of, you know, I get fiscal responsibility, but everybody's come as far as we have now with staffing. I think it's a terrible idea to start thinking about we're only going to have X amount of guys on for a weekend. Because the trouble is, unlike EMS where you could go pick a patient up with 2 people and leave and go to the hospital and you're done, is I could have 6 guys that are on staff and they get into a situation where they need 12 or 15. And Richard could have 6 guys, Jeff has 6 guys. Well, this call could be something that requires a pile of people. And we're so far behind the 8 ball. You have guys that say, well, I'm on call this weekend, I'm not coming.
And so I see that again, you know, now that we've talked through it a little bit, is something that the new organizational structure would have to work on. You know, once we develop the department and you have that staffed with officers, whether that's, you know, a chief and 2 deputies, or I don't know the organizational structure that is appropriate, but that staffing would be then their job to figure out. So you're all the experts, like I said, so you would have to figure that out.
Well, and together you look at what you have and what you know, we have to look at the type of calls and what we're capable of handling on our own. And again, like I said in the beginning of this, my goal is that the town of Haverhill can self-sustain, so we don't have to rely on another community. Not to say we're not going to use them, but our trucks and our people to be able to get to a fire scene and handle it. And the mere fact is sometimes when you call for mutual aid, you don't know what you're going to get. So when they call us,
Right.
So
we
this
don't
is
have to call to know what's coming.
This is a perfect example of why the document that I created needs to be worked through and we need to utilize it, because this is a perfect example of something we spent 20 minutes, 15, almost 17 minutes talking about. And if you review the data and the standards that exist, the standard is NFPA 1720. 1720 says you need 15 to 17 men in the first 10 minutes of a fire. 17 men, interestingly enough, 17 is close to 20. In order to have 20, the statistical variable is 1 to 3. So if you expect to have 20 guys on a scene with a statistical valuation, you need to have 60 guys on the department. So we're talking about 60 to 70 people in town. The statistical relevance nationally is that only 1 out of every 3 of those is going to show up. That's not a Haverhill number. That's not a Vermont number. That's not a New Hampshire number. That's a national number that's utilized by the insurance service organization that they've actually computed. So an evaluation of the data is where this is key to moving forward with a true organizational structure based on statistical significance as well as standard.
Thanks, John.
So I got one more question to ask you guys. I think Haverhill Corner down here in Woodsville, we ought to have a contract written that we have a fire station, we have all our trucks, and we can keep our men to go, and still we could go under the umbrella of the town of Haverhill, but it would be the contract that we have to have our men, our station, and our truck down here in Haverhill Corner. I don't know if you feel the same way, Jeff, or not.
Can I ask you a question, Richard?
Go ahead.
And I know where you're going with this, and I don't disagree. You're sticking up for your people, but my question to you guys, and I know Tony's in the room with you, and I'm sure Ed's listening, is where is anything we've talked about that I've talked about that you've heard from my mouth or this committee or anything, where do you think you're going to lose your people from?
So if we close our department down and go with one station?
Where have you heard that you were going to close your department? I mean, in Bridget, and she's admitted that we've talked about having, you know, a public safety building in the town of Haverhill, but I want to be very clear with you as your friend, Richard, that it's not my intent or probably anybody else on this to lose your members. One of the first things I said was how do we go about this and retain everybody that we still have? How do we go about making a change or even talking about this and still retain our help? Because our employees are our biggest asset. Everybody in your fire department's an employee to you. And then precinct or the town.
So I'd like to make a point too. When I've talked about a centrally located emergency services or public service facility, there's a lot of reasons for that are not just a fire department. So, you know, my police department is crammed into a cubby hole at the back side of the JRM building. They are sitting on top of each other back there. And legitimately, you know, that space is too small for them. And we have put off renovating that space because they would like to get out of there and we'd like them to be able to move into a better space. And we need more office space. So there's the police department, there's the highway department, who is also sitting in a building that's not been maintained. This year, Primex did an inspection on that building and determined that it's in desperate need of some significant safety repairs. So we have decided that instead of trying to crutch up that old shed that the highway department is in, we would rather move them into a more structurally sound building and put money into a more structurally sound building. So, you know, the idea of centrally locating comes from a lot of different places. You know, one is the police department, one is the highway department. And then of course you've got this idea that if we're going to do that, we might as well have a centrally located hub of fire services. That doesn't mean that there aren't stations throughout Haverhill, because the ISO is going to show you where you need to position trucks and people. And certainly we already know that's not one place in the center of Haverhill. That's not going to adequately cover all of Haverhill. And so, but since North Haverhill Fire Station is already right in the center of Haverhill, it makes sense that that station would become part of that larger emergency services centrally located facility. That doesn't say in any way, shape, or form that those other stations are going to go anywhere. And it might, it's just not going to happen. But that's where that comes from. That's where that conversation has come from, because part of the strategic planning 5 years out is to get the police department out of their cubby, get the highway department into a safe facility that has everything that they need. And then if you're going to do that, there's federal funding available to centrally locate and cohabitate your services. And so, of course, then you would include the fire service from North Haverhill into that facility, because it makes sense. And because you have to have at least 3 to get the money. You know,
And we've talked, the fire chiefs have talked, I have the oldest station in the town. I have the least amount of space. So we've talked that, you know, each one of them would have supported a station. So look at it this way. This is just a way to do it so the town doesn't have to pay so much, because we can get the grant funding if we combine other services. So
the other part of it for me is that the town of Haverhill already owns the North Haverhill Fire Station itself. The town owns that building.
you're lucky.
The town does not own the building in Haverhill Corner. The town does not own the building in Woodsville that those 2 stations sit in today. So it's easy for the town, under the umbrella of a town-wide fire department, to move the North Haverhill Fire Department into a cohabitated facility. It would also be a benefit to Woodsville Fire Department or station and Haverhill Corner Fire Station, because if we were able to come up with the federal funding and do this cohabitated facility in North Haverhill, we could put in training facility for all firefighters in Haverhill. We could put in conference facilities that were adequate for you all to meet together and to train together and to learn together. That doesn't mean you have to work out of that building. It just means that you have that facility at your disposal. So that's the thought process and the goal, future planning and ideas. And the goal is to get as much federal dollars as we can to be able to do that.
Richie, let me jump in your corner for a second with some data. My house is 3 miles from your fire station. It's 6 miles from the North Haverhill station or the center of that particular geographic region. If you were to lose your fire station for any reason, my insurance would go up $300 to $500. You can bet for $300 to $500 I'm going to go kicking and screaming with that one. So I'll be in your corner all the way, buddy.
Okay.
You and everybody else. So think about how many people that would impact. So that's definitely something that you have to consider when talking about, you know, fire services throughout and within the town of Haverhill.
John, I think it's a long 3 miles.
It is. You got to go around Robin Hood's barn, or at least Fagnet's barn.
But just so clear, Richard, I know you were talking about the contract, but to my point, what everybody just said was, is, again, I don't foresee your one building going anywhere, but I sure as hell won't be a part of something that eliminates your manpower. You know, that doesn't make sense for anybody in the town of Haverhill. This is about being together and utilizing the manpower that you've created down there, and Mike Lavoie's created, and I can't even remember who was before them, because you two together over 100 years old. I'm sure as hell not remember who was before you two.
You guys, some of you guys don't even remember when Gary's fuel burned. The garage burned up there.
What year was it, Richard?
80. I don't remember. It's back in the
82.
82? I was -4.
I was a newbie wet behind the ears.
You know, we had the bridge went down here. And there was a girl trapped in that. Mike, you remember that? Was you around that night?
Is that when the,
Michael, was you around that night when the bridge went
I'm
down?
the one who cut her out with the chainsaw, if your memory serves you. And it was 1983 when Gary's burned, because we had just got our new tank truck.
Yeah, yeah.
I stand corrected, sir.
So I am older than most, right? But my memory still serves me a little bit.
All I heard was I gained a year.
I'm up on my soapbox right now. So I would like to just make a point, Richard. Do you clearly understand now that there's no intention of closing our fire station?
I hope that's true.
Well, I take people at face value, but my point is that's been a very, very big concern of yours. And
Yes, it has been.
For us to move forward to get where most people want to be, I would love to hear you say that you realize that now, that as Phil commented, all these rumors, and I keep saying who's saying them, because that's the only way you're going to get to the source of the truth, and it never comes about. He's saying right now, tonight, if I heard you right, Phil, that it didn't come from him. So I don't know where any weight would come from what you had commented to the commissioners, that the building would close, the fire trucks would be sold, and you didn't know what would happen to your men. I think you can dismiss that. I believe you can dismiss that, but it's got to come from you that you're comfortable with that.
I got to think on that, Mike.
that's fair.
Well, as long as you know, Richard, that I'm definitely in your corner. I don't want to see your men go anywhere. I don't want to see your building go anywhere. I don't want to see your trucks go anywhere. All I'm looking at is that I think we can be more efficient, and however that looks, even if it's a little bit, you can't sit there and after everything you've heard tonight and tell us that we can't be more efficient. We certainly can. We've been talking about it for a long time.
Yeah, but guys, we need Woodsville on board with us.
Absolutely. I don't disagree with you 1 second. However, I'm a realist and I understand that their commissioners are against it. That doesn't mean Jeff's against it totally. You know, there's a lot of work to do up there too, but to move forward, as Chief Lavoie said, you know, I don't envision anything without either one of you guys. And I can tell you that if that was the case, that Phil Blanchard probably wouldn't exist doing this anymore. I got enough.
I think you got to understand too, that you're all going to be partners no matter what. So you're going to continue to partner to provide the best fire service throughout the town of Haverhill. I mean, period. So, you know, I don't want that to inhibit your ability to help on this committee to develop the new fire department. The other thing I want to dispel, and I've heard this from a number of people, and I want to make sure that that everybody understands that, you know, I've heard from the public that decisions have already been made about who's going to run the show and who's going to be the fire chief and I want everyone to understand that this committee hasn't even developed the organizational structure yet. So none of those decisions have been made, and those decisions won't be made in a bubble. So once we get down the road a few months, 3 months, 8 months, 9 months, a year, and we know what this fire department's going to look like, that's when and this is the other thing that I've made clear to Phil and to others when we've talked about it, is that, you know, at some point you're going to have to develop job descriptions, and you don't develop job descriptions around a person. You don't do that. You develop a job description around what you need for that position to do the best possible job in that position. And it's task-based, and you develop the job description, and then you pick the right people to fill those positions. You don't build a job description around a person. So put that aside for now. I don't want people to think that this is already a staffed department. It's not. We collectively have not developed the organizational structure. We haven't developed the job description. So certainly nobody's been placed in positions. So, and that will not be done in a bubble.
I think that's one of the biggest fears within all three departments, actually, even though Phillips guys are more on board than others, is that you're talking about, Northern New Hampshire volunteer firefighters here. And this plan makes it sound like you're gonna have city full-time firefighters basically, okay? And that's one of the fears that people have is like, so doesn't matter how many years people have, but it's like, I've been on this department for how many years and now I have to like change everything. We're volunteer firefighters here. We show up when we can. Even me as a chief in Woodsville, I've missed, I guarantee 90% of the calls since 1st of January. Just because of the time of the calls, everything, my job and everything like that. So that's one of the biggest fears we have throughout the whole town is, what's this going to look like? Are we going to have a full-time chief that's going to start knocking you down because you can't show up to a call because, you're working or you're away with your family? What does this look like? I think we need to start there and let's develop. I think a lot of good conversation tonight, definitely. It's put some things at ease for me, I think for Richie, but also we got to understand the Woodsville situation is very complex. As you and Darwin, everybody here probably knows, it's a really complex situation in Woodsville. Personally, I don't know if we're even going to be a part of the town of Haverhill in the future. Who knows? That's up for a vote in a couple of weeks or next week if the meeting happens. Who knows what's going to happen with us? So I think that's one of our biggest fears throughout our department alone is what's it going to look like? Is Jeff going to be booted out as a chief and he's going to answer to Philip or whoever? Who knows who? But how's this going to look? It's a fear, I think.
Okay, that's fair. That's a con then, clearly. Just the unknown.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of my biggest cons I had was that. So, as far as pros, I mean, obviously, anything we can do collaboratively together is a pro. We've come a long ways, and I think Phil and I and Richie have worked really well together through the last 5 years since we all three became chiefs together. And we did used to meet. We used to meet at least once a month, if not twice a month, and just discuss everything from purchasing equipment to training to manpower to just how's it going. And we've gotten away from that. And I think, there's a lot of things in town that have just gone on that have just, separated us all.
Okay, thank you. Well, this has been a great conversation. It really has. I appreciate everybody's input. I was a little worried after the last meeting that nobody would say anything, so I'm super glad that you all did. And it has been helpful for me. It's good for me to hear all of your different perspectives, and I'm sure that it's useful for each of you to hear each other's perspectives too. So why don't we conclude our meeting tonight with the understanding that we'll go back and look at the mission and purpose statements, as well as the outline that John put together. And be willing to come back at the next meeting in 2 weeks with some ideas. What I'll do is I'll send you out the minutes, and probably I'll send out a few action items too, just to remind you what we're working on before the next meeting. Does that sound okay to everyone?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. So the next is to accept a motion to adjourn, unless there's
Motion.
anything anyone else wants to say.
Excuse
I'll
me.
make the motion.
When is the next meeting? What's the date?
2 weeks, Tuesday, 6:30, which is
26.
The
It can't be the
26th.
26.
26, yeah.
It can't
Oh,
be-
we have a select board meeting that night. Oh,
It's golf night now too, hopefully.
You were told last meeting you couldn't golf.
yeah, the select board meeting's being bumped from the 25th to the 26th. Does anybody have a suggestion on a night that we could meet again?
Just move it to June on the next Tuesday, Bridget, because we can't keep bouncing days around. It's gonna get too confusing.
June 2nd? Is June 2nd okay for everyone?
Sure.
It's all right with me.
Bridget, will that be the last meeting of this committee prior to our annual precinct meeting, this June 17th, I believe it is?
Should have one more.
You'll have one the night before.
I'm just hoping that we can have everything filtered out and have good answers.
We'll have 2 meetings before your annual meeting.
Okay,
2 more
thank you.
meetings. Okay, so we'll meet on the 2nd and the 16th of June, if that works for everyone. I don't see any shaking heads.
No. We're good.
Okay. Super. So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make it.
Jeff
I'll
makes a
second.
motion. Who seconded?
Mark?
Mark
Cheers.
seconded. Okay. Roll call. Darwin?
Aye.
I say aye. John?
All right.
Rich?
All right.
Bill?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Jeff?
Nay. Kidding.
You want to keep going? Mike?
Aye.
Dennis?
Yeah.
All right. So good night, everyone. Thank you so much. This was good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.